dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't go.
Hi everyone, Matt here with a quick solo bonus episode for an amazing solo role-playing game. Do you have darkness within your soul? Have you forgotten more than you've learned? Are you vampire? Well, if that's you, I think I have a fun role-playing game for you to try out. Recently, I was stuck in the house without power or water for weeks, and this solo RPG kept me company and inspired a ton of new ideas for my other games. And so on this episode, I want to talk to you about 1,000-Year-Old Vampire by Tim Hutchings. Now, this is a game I think that is unlike any other role-playing game that you've played before. It's not a choose-your-own-adventure novel, but it's something in between that and a traditional role-playing game. It is a solo game about journaling the life and descent into madness or depravity or triumph or beauty of the life of a very, very long-lived vampire. Play the game by yourself, by just journaling in a notebook or maybe on note cards or on a character sheet, or you can just kind of think about things in your head. And it's putting the experience into words, it's if you're someone who likes writing stories or likes exploring the past or likes coming up with just really interesting backstories, often tragic for your villains or characters and your novel, this game, I think, is for you. Let me get to the basics of the game. The game is available on PDF or in just a gorgeous hardbound book that I highly recommend just because it looks and feels so beautiful. The game requires you to make a person, a mortal, from the past turned into a monster. You then, through a really interesting mechanic, play through their life experiences as they betray their friends, kill mortals, resurrect a friend from the dead, make an enemy of a supernatural creature, forget everything that's happened to them and start all over again, and experience the passage of time and history in a way that is very different than just really any other role-playing game. When you start to play 1,000-Year-Old Vampire, after you get familiar with the basics of the rules, the game asks you to make a character newly turned into a vampire. Your vampire's character doesn't have stats, but instead they have a character sheet that will be familiar to anyone who's played a role-playing game before. You have experiences and memories, which are just sort of a bucket term for a group of experiences that are together, skills, resources, and then other sort of ancillary characters besides your vampire, both mortal and immortal. After you've created your newly turned vampire, you start rolling some dice. The game has a very simple mechanic where you roll a 10-sided dice and a 6-sided dice and take the difference between the two, moving either forward or backward through the pages that make up the bulk of the book, which are experience prompts, things that happen to your vampire character, which you then journal or record what happens based on that experience prompt. Just an example from the very first page. In your blood hunger, you destroy someone close to you. Kill one of your mortal characters. Create a mortal if none available. Take the skill Bloodthirsty. You proceed through the game, checking skills, adding resources, eliminating resources, and, a playthrough, depending on how long you want to spend journaling on each entry, can take anywhere from, I did my first one in 2 hours, Another one, it took 10 hours, just how much you want to put through it. And you'll go through somewhere between, I don't know, around 20 or maybe 30 of these prompts until your vampire reaches the end of their journey, which could be them getting destroyed as they lose all their resources and skills. A prompt tells you that the vampire eventually ceases to be, or they reach some other sort of stasis as described in the prompt. That means your story has come to an end and you can set it aside, at least for now. What makes this game so interesting, as opposed to just sort of, I'm just going to sit down for 2 hours and write a story about a vampire, is that you really can't predict or have much control over what happens next in the story, right? You are at the whims of fate or destiny or just the passage of time. And I quickly realized as I played the game, as I sort of, I'm going to create a vampire who's born in this area and is going to go through this historic event, is that the game really encourages you to cede control to sort of this randomness as your vampire moves through time and develops into, I made a character that I was like, I'm going to try and be a really nice vampire. Ended up being quite monstrous. I made a vampire that wanted to conquer the world in the beginning, and guess what? That vampire completely forgot about that. Because one of the fun things about going through this game, and you might end a character like one of mine with somewhere around 10 pages of journaling, is that your vampire is very lonely. It's a game a little bit about loneliness and about memory, as your vampire can only hold a certain number of experiences in their mind. They can keep a diary that they may expand on or even lose that can contain the things that their brain just can't hold in any longer, as they have lived this cursed life for so long. So sometime one of my characters forgot their original name and most of their existence, and kind of became a completely different person. And that's kind of really exciting. It's a sort of character progression and a tragedy and a triumph all at the same time. And you as the player, can of course go back and remember some of the things that your vampire did that your character can't remember. And that's super exciting. Just an example of one of my responses to one of the game's prompts. Outside of Istanbul, a man wearing a bloody feather around his neck and dressed in a 3-piece business suit and pocket watch hands me 12 numbers to secret Swiss bank accounts. He says that the talons of the falcon are ready to serve me. I had forgotten completely about this cult that I established centuries ago in Kaifeng. Crazy stuff, right? And if you love it, I'm trying to think about who this game is really for. I think it's for anyone who loves loves doing journaling, loves doing creative writing, loves creating stories. It's also, I think, a great game for dungeon masters. Like, several of the characters I created this have already found their ways into a couple of my regular D&D games, either through general inspiration or just straight up lifted from the pages of my journals. If you want to create villains with motivations, especially fantastical or tragic motivations, this is a great way to get some inspiration or to actually do it. It's a game for people who like creative writing. It's a game for people who like creating characters and seeing them grow and change in ways that they cannot predict. It's also a game for history nerds. I'm looking over my notes here, and I kept a running list of Wikipedia and other articles or things that I researched. Let's see. For one character, here's just the complete list of things I ended up looking up as part of playing the game. Berkham Kaldan, Tingriism, Menachieism, the Silk Roads, Samarkand, the festival along the Spring River in Kaifeng, the Mongol siege of Kaifeng, the Mongol general Subutai, Istanbul in the late Ottoman period, Swiss bank accounts, and the spread of gunpowder in the Safavid Empire. If you're a history nerd like Rob, like myself, like I think a lot of fans of the show, Thousand Year Vampire is a great tool to just kind of, it's almost like playing the Wikipedia rabbit hole or the, look up history things in your Oxford history of blank that I know we all have sitting on the shelf and have definitely not pirated from some sketchy Russian site, right? It's just a great way to stumble upon unexpected gems of the human past through this utterly and often unhuman creature. When you play the game, your vampire will do things that really surprise you. And I think that's one of the joy and what really makes this a role-playing game is that when we sit down at a table with dice and a placemat, right, your characters, your friends' characters, your character, your NPCs will do things that surprise you and are really unexpected. I know novelists talk about this all the time, that, they create a character and, this character surprised me. And, they're describing their process of writing. And this game, through its set of prompts and dice, also does this. I want to talk just briefly about the layout and design of the book as well. It's filled with images from the British archives, that the author has, can't imagine how long it took to painstakingly collect these, but it just makes the book feel absolutely beautiful, historical, and inspired, like an artifact itself, like a diary that your vampire might keep as they are trying to hold on to certain aspects of their past, right? My vampire roamed for 2 centuries in the woods of Siberia before Russian conquest, built an entire cave system for themselves in a beautiful cliff looking over Lake Baikal, dragged hundreds of victims to its clear depths as and create a skeleton garden down there, and then completely forgot about it and became a corporate overlord of the the interwar period. It's just things like that that make this game tons of fun. Hopefully, I've convinced you that a Thousand Year Vampire is something you should give a try to. I've avoided reviewing this for a long time just because the hard copy has been on back order forever. But it's actually, if I understand what it's like right now, you can order it and expect a hard copy in the reasonable future. And not have to wait years for it. You can also get a much cheaper PDF copy. Links to the 1,000-Year-Old Vampire website in the description of this podcast. And you can absolutely get the same experience out of this game without the hard copy. But it is just a very beautiful thing to have and own and to use while you're playing the game, curled up under the blankets with your pen, paper, and pretentious moleskin notebook like I did. A couple other random observations about 1,000-Year Vampire is that the prompts are varied and interesting. They obviously, a ton of playtesting and work went in them. And while there's no strict progression of time, they do have sort of a general trend to them, right? The word colony doesn't come up until many pages in, and same with words about new technologies. So while there's no hard and fast rules about where your vampire must go or, how long your journey will take, it does sort of give you a general idea if you want to take a vampire from a couple hundred or 1,000 years in the past, and maybe if that creature is lucky, make it up to the present day. This game requires a lot of work from you as the player. It is, and this is where I get to the kind of criticisms section, though I feel like I'm sort of at a loss of vocabulary in that this game is so different from so many of the role-playing games that we've reviewed on this show. The initial creation of your vampire takes a lot of work at the very beginning. You have to create skills, resources, other characters, many experiences of their mortal life, and some of these may not matter at all and can quickly fade as your first couple prompts launch you to a different part of the world or have you fall asleep and get covered with dust to wake up several hundred years later. I feel like while that happens in some games, and that's just kind of part of the game, it is a little hard to get started, right? Once you've gotten started, the game goes much faster, but it's a little rough in that the first entry on your character sheet or in your journal is a lot more difficult than everything else that will come, and, it's kind of hard to take that leap into, I'm just going to sit here and journal and not be afraid of creating this story all by myself. The other thing, and I'm not sure it's actually a criticism, is that the choices that you make, of course, don't really have, with the mechanic that's set up, any bearing on what prompt that comes up next. And I think after 2 playthroughs now, I've sort of come around to this, right? Gone is the choose your own adventure. Do you choose to fight the bully or call for help? Turn to page 67. That probably wouldn't work here. However, there's the sort of total secession of control can be, I think, at times a little frustrating. But once you've completely surrendered and said, this is that type of game, it works really well. The book has more than just a guide to getting started. It also has 2 very short examples of play. I remember reading through the rules at the beginning, then sitting down to create my character and being like, I feel like I'm lost creating my character. Where were those examples of play? They took me a long time to find, but they should be enough to guide you. It would have been nice to have a few more examples to play. You can find some online. There's a total of 80 prompts in this book, but don't let that fool you as, that's not going to be enough to fuel multiple playthroughs, is because you sort of forget what the prompts are because they mean something completely different in the context of whatever character you have so far. Also, each prompt, actually, for most of them, has 3 other prompts on it, basically deepening a similar theme, and you'll experience these if you hit that prompt again in a game, which means as you play through, you definitely need to keep track of what numbers you've landed on so far. One of the consequences of rolling the dice and the D10 and you subtract a D6 from it is oftentimes it feels like you'll spend an hour bouncing around prompts within a page or 2 of each other or going backwards, and then all of a sudden, after 2 or 3 random rolls, you're jumping forward huge numbers. The numbers don't really correspond to time, but you can kind of think of them that way. On my first playthrough, I really didn't let myself move fast enough through time, and my vampire, instead of being a 1,000-year-old vampire, was really only like a 200-year-old vampire. But after my second playthrough, I sort of released myself to the game and told the story of the son of a wealthy merchant family in Samarkand, a follower of Manichaeism, back in the ancient days of the Silk Roads, who traveled basically throughout Siberia, Mongolia, the Song dynasty, the Safavid Empire, fought some knights in Hungary, lived in the late Ottoman Empire in Istanbul, and traveled eventually to London and New York City. And if you're a fan of Gothic horror or learning mythology of places, supernatural creatures appear a lot in the prompts, or, as I think I've already hit home, history, you're going to love kind of how this game can drag you through huge periods of time and story and character. One final minor criticism is that it is really difficult, even after 2 playthroughs, to find a satisfactory way to keep track of the things that happen to your vampire. I found the original character sheet was it's hard to write on, and I want to be in a journal, and then this section filled up too quickly and I couldn't keep track of which memories and experiences were the ones that were current to my vampire and which ones were in my diary. And I would think that actually writing on 3x5 note cards might actually be better, but that's also not satisfying. I don't know what a good solution to this is. It's just keeping track of everything can be a little messy at times. However, your vampire's life is also very messy and full of drama. So Maybe that's not a bug, but a feature. The game also includes a couple additional prompts if you really, really want to get down and try something new. The prompts have some extra themes. The game also includes sort of its version of the red, yellow, green things that you might be uncomfortable with, a safety tool, if you will, for individual play, a way to check yourself if you're like, the story is making me feel a way I don't want to feel. It's got that too. It's a really well thought out solo RPG system, a well-deserved winner of all of its INI awards. If you have questions about 1,000-Year-Old Vampire by Tim Hutchings, or other questions about Dungeons & Dragons role-playing games, feel free to drop us a line at dmofnone@gmail.com. And in conclusion, I absolutely love this game. It was different than just about anything I've played in the role-playing game space in quite some time. And for Dungeon Masters, I think it's just a great way to think about characters and building NPCs and the world, and really your own creativity as a Dungeon Master for coming up with stories and ideas. It's almost like if playing a role-playing game is getting out on the field and giving it your all with your players, playing 1,000-Year-Old Vampire feels like doing some intensive training, doing cut sprints to get ready for that next big game. All right, thanks for listening to our review of 1,000-Year-Old Vampire. We'll see you very soon. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and of course, keep rolling them dice.
I was living in a devil town. Didn't know it was a devil town. Oh Lord, it really brings me down about the devil town. And all my friends were vampires. Didn't know they were vampires. Turns out I was a vampire myself in the devil town. I was living in a devil town. Didn't know it was a devil town. Oh Lord, it really brings me down about the devil town.